Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we'll be talking about the AI bubble and the debate about whether it is a bubble or not a bubble. So, hopefully, this will be a very exciting episode. This was instigated, obviously, everybody has been thinking about whether AI has been a bubble, but Igor and I were at a conference last week called Elevate in Toronto. And that's where all the startups gather in Canada once a year, besides Web Summit. And so we got to see what the latest companies are doing around AI, what was working, what wasn't. And Igor really got the sense that there was a bit of a feeling that it is a bubble. And we'd love to talk to you about that. And then Josef will talk about the parallels of that to the .com bubble. And then I will give my own position on whether I think it is a bubble or not and how to view it, which I think you'll find interesting as well. So Igor, do you want to set the stage for us?
Yeah, thank you, Sheikh. Hello, everybody. So Elevate Fest, I would say it's like a small web summit. It's trying to get bigger. Last year it was a bit shorter. This year I think it was one day longer. I believe so. The amount of people was comparable. I don't really know the statistic. Looked comparable to me, maybe a little bit more. Obviously, there were lots of AI startups which were pitching their ideas. And what was fun, apart from AI startups, there were also older established businesses which introduced AI, and there were representatives of venture studios, venture companies which fund AI startups, and all of them shared their experience and their ideas. And the vibe which I personally felt is that many from more established businesses and from venture companies, they become more and more cautious about AI, and they believe that it is a bubble and it may burst soon. As they say, in the next 12 to 18 months, potentially it may burst. It was funny because you listen to that, and then in 5 minutes you have a startup pitching their idea, and everyone tries to be very cheerful and supporting. And in the next 5 minutes, then someone else tells that nothing's going to work out. So that was kind of fun. A few highlights that I would take from the event. The final panel discussion, where there were three representatives of big Canadian venture companies. And the person who was leading the discussion asked them, first of all, it was a lady. The lady asked them, why don't you find Canadian startups? Because 80% of Canadian startups are funded by US money. And the answer was more or less, let's think globally. Let's not think only about Canadian startups, which was hilarious in my opinion. That's the number one. And another point was when, again, a question was asked. Let's say we have a startup which does not have AI, and they just don't need it. And they are already at a certain stage and they show their success and things are going fine. But to secure the next round of funding, they think they might need to show something with AI because it's still hype and everyone still wants it. And they kind of artificially pushing it there. So what should they do? And that was a question to venture companies. And one of the representatives answered, oh, yeah, they should introduce AI, of course. That's so important, which was, again, for me, it was hilarious to listen because obviously that was not the correct answer that everyone expected to have. So basically, that's the vibe that I felt. Personally, I think that with the technology, everything is going in the right direction. It doesn't mean that AI is going anywhere. Of course not. Obviously, we'll have the AI giants that we have now, like ChatGPT, like Cursor. Like they're not going anywhere. Obviously, they will be earning lots of money, and their technology is good, and it's still developing, and it will be developing, and it will be bringing lots of value. But lots of startups, and especially startups who appeared kind of on this hype where everyone was basically throwing money at you like a few years ago if you just say that you have something with AI, those startups will probably burn. And the reason for that is Again, that's just my opinion. I'm not specialist in venture studio questions, but the standard business model of venture studio is like you fund 20 startups, then 19 of them fail, and the 20th covers everything for everybody. And that's kind of the model which worked, which is, again, it's a very challenging model, and it imposes very hard requirements on startups, because some startups are just not able to scale that fast, and then they take the investment and fail to deliver and burn. Though if they didn't take the investment, they could actually build the business. But that's a different question. The problem is that with AI, I believe that the requirements for qualifications got way lower, which means that now it's not like 1 in 20 startup will succeed, but it's like 1 in 100 startup, or maybe 1 in 200 startup will succeed. And this that may cross the threshold where the venture studio just doesn't get their money. And this is how they fail, essentially. I think that's essentially what I mean when I speak about AI bubble and all those hype startups basically losing their business. So, Shake, it's your word now.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I think so. This is great, and I'd love to contextualize it as Josef will do with the .com bubble. I was not really paying attention at that period of time to these things, uh, but I believe Joseph was. So we'll talk about that. I think there's three things here, right? I think one is with any new technology, you get a lot of hype at the beginning. Why? Because there's a first mover advantage, right? And there's a sense that this could have huge advantage. And the startups who got in early have done well, many of them, right? Cursor, Windsurf, we can think about like 11 Labs or many of these companies that got in early and they had a good product and they had good team have done well. Okay, but unlike the .com era, AI has a much smaller percentage of successful companies, far smaller. Okay, and the moat around these companies is far weaker. They mostly have a prompt engineering plus context plus some endpoint moat. The moat is not in the core technology itself. So the .com era to me was like real estate, digital real estate, right? And if you got in early and you had a good website, you could get more traffic to your digital real estate and you could sell stuff. Okay. Now, AI is not real estate. Okay, AI is intelligence. So if you think of the .com era as like a product, like a digital product, like real estate, land is a product. AI is more like a service, right? Intelligence is more like a service, right? But it's not a commoditizable service. You can't build a moat around the service because there's just one service provider. You can't do much with it. So until such a time where it's feasible for smaller companies to make their own models, which might take 10, 15 years, because we need compute to be cheap enough for that to happen. Until that time, there will only ever be a few model providers. So all of AI is restricted by a few model companies, which are doing very well. OpenAI is doing very well. Anthropic is doing very well. DeepMind, Gemini is doing very well. So all of these model companies are doing extremely well, but it's the companies that are dependent on them, unlike the .com era, that have a very, very hard time finding a business. And every 3 months, Sam Altman wakes up and decides he's going to kill a few billion-dollar startups, right? He did that with Midjourney, right? And then VO happened for videos. VO is now very good, right? So they keep kind of doing that. And now they're killing NA10 and Make.com with their workflows. Will it kill all use cases? No, but you certainly are going to see that the market will suddenly shift in terms of its evaluation of those other companies. And it happened already with Cursor and Windsurf. Windsurf was sold. The initial offer was $3 billion, but it was also getting harder to compete. And because the model providers can jack up their prices at any point, so it's very hard for them to compete with model providers. So I think this is structurally different than the .com bubble. But I do think that most companies have realized they cannot really build a business on AI. And the stragglers who keep trying, some of them have a really good business idea or really good proprietary data, but the majority are very much, they're dreaming and hoping. I heard this word once upon a time, hopium. It's like, or copium. It's like the drug of choice for entrepreneurs. They're coping on hope. So there's a lot of hopium and copium going around at present, and I think that's something that we saw at the conference. But Josef, I'd love to hear about how you think this relates to the dot-com era.
Yeah, the blessing and curse of having 30 years in the industry in a few weeks. Um, as far as I remember, I didn't get an opportunity to look through my old notes and things like that. As far as I remember, we have the situation feels very different for me. I mean, when I walk around and give talks today about AI, it feels very, 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 very similar to the talks I gave in 96, 97 about the early internet, and I tried to explain what it does and what it is. And actually, nobody really knew and nobody really cared about what it is and what it can do. But the first phase of every talk was dispelling the fears and the uncertainty that people have. And that is very much the same nowadays with a new talk about AI. The first thing at least I here in Europe have to talk about is, no, it's not going to be RoboCop. No, it's not going to be the Terminator, at least not in the next 4 weeks. Let's see what we can positively make out of it. And then we have a very different situation when we talk about AI. Very different, and thanks, Sheikh, for pointing that out. Very different from the early internet. Actually, the early World Wide Web. The internet has been around since the 60s. The World Wide Web was what really put it into everybody's living room in the late 90s. And the main difference is the inventor of the World Wide Web, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, carefully chose and actually thought about it with his then employer, the CERN here in Geneva, to not have any patents on it. So the entire World Wide Web, all the infrastructure, everything you need to put up web technology and make the web work and work for the people is free of royalties. So the entire infrastructure is there. You sit down, take a keyboard, take a mouse, start programming. And if you have a good idea and you're smart, then you can still conquer the world based on web technology alone. There is no real intellectual property barrier there. The situation in the AI world is very, very different, as Sheikh has pointed out, where everybody working in AI is depending on a very small number of model providers. Let's say there are, if we just think in LLMs, there are 5 in the US and another 5 in the rest of the world. And every single one of them can upset every business model. Because it is quite hard to build something that is LLM agnostic, so that you can, for example, swap out ChatGPT for Claude or the other way around. And there is a significant bill attached to using one of these models. So one way or another, you will the startups have a significant cost base that we never had in the .com time. But still, when you look at the companies that made a fortune in .com days, many of them were hardware companies. Cisco, for example, was huge, and a few others. So, as always, when there's a gold rush, if you happen to be in the position to have suitable shovels, then your business is safe. Is ChatGPT's business safe? Yes, they have great shovels. Is any of ChatGPT's users' business safe? Not so much. It's a very different animal. But I think the biggest difference is my memory of the bursting of the .com bubble, just off the top of my head, about 20 years ago, is two major things. The one thing is, as I earlier said, the technology was there. You need a server, you need some HTML, some JavaScript, a little bit of Apache, a little bit of some database. Everything was there for everybody. And it was absolutely clear that you can solve the problems that people undertook to solve with the technology that is there. The more interesting question was, can you make money out of it? There were companies like Foursquare, for example, that was doing location-based services, and it was clear that Foursquare can deliver on their promise, but it was not clear how to make money based on that. So the venture capital companies jumped in and said, okay, if we have millions of users and a ton of location-based data, I have no idea how we're going to make money of it. But it is obvious that somebody's going to come around the corner, make it a part of a bigger whole, and make a lot of money, and I'll get my share. And that's going to fly. And it did. Foursquare is gone, but whoever bought it is still more or less running the core technology, building on the core user base, and so on and so forth. Now with AI, this situation is the opposite. If all the AI-based service companies can deliver on their promise, it is absolutely obvious that they are going to be rich, rich, rich. Why? Because they deliver a value that is unbelievable. The question is, will AI deliver that value? We have, I mean, it has been a huge ride for the last 2, 3, 4 years when ChatGPT broke through. Let's take the topic of hallucinations. We've taken the hallucination rate down from, I don't remember the exact numbers, 60% to, let's say, 90%. Don't pull on the numbers. It's the principle behind it that counts. That is huge progress. But seriously, if somebody is sitting across from you and says, I'm going to take over your sales department and I have a hallucination rate of only 10%, would you hire that guy? Not at all. There's no way. So the gap, the technological gap between what we have today and what we need to really deploy this thing in a scalable way is so much bigger than it used to be 20, 25 years ago. And it is absolutely not clear that today's AI technologies, for example, with large language models, or for example, with stable diffusion, or whatever you have, is going to be actually ever able to deliver that. If it works, it's going to be great, but it's very likely that a few startups are going to run out of money before they reach the point, if the technology ever reaches it. And the other thing that cracked the dot-com bubble is something that many people tend to forget until it's that day of the year again, namely September 11, 9/11, which is also, it's 25 years ago now. And that was kind of in German we would say the drop that made the barrel spill. That little thing that made an already overheated overall system lose its coherence. And I have no idea what this could look like over the next, you call it 12 or 18 months, Igor. Chances are, I mean, the world is sufficiently fragile these days that something is going to jump out of the bushes and say, here I am, and now please pop. But I have no idea what it's going to be and when it's going to be, but I'm fairly sure that without such an external impulse, we are still going to see more growth of whatever it is that we have in front of our nose than what we have. But if that thing jumps out of the bush, I tend to believe a bursting of that something is inevitable.
So let me kind of respond to this. I love what you're saying. So one is, I think, look, we can look at the self-driving car history, right? So people thought we'd have self-driving cars by now, right? Over the course of 10, 15 years, how long we've been trying. We are getting closer. It's asymptotically closer to the self-driving car that never arrives, you know? So that's one thing. And I think that is a tendency of AI, that it's kind of almost there, but it's never quite hit. And it keeps getting closer to being almost just there. And that illusion keeps getting harder and harder to detect, but it's still an illusion. So I think that's a challenge. So one thing AI has gotten better at now is video. We've seen a huge improvement. So like with short form video, I can tell sometimes if it's made by AI anymore, like visually. But it can make a 3-hour movie. But AI is getting the exponential is still working for length of tasks. So AI is like every 6 months or something, it's doubling the amount of like the length of task it can do. So maybe it will produce a 1-hour movie in the future. I don't know though. I think AI has trouble over longer context because at some point it's like it's recursing on its own predictions. I think that creates necessary drift. It's I think that's embedded in the way it works. But anyway, let's so one is look at self-driving cars. That's one way it can go. The other is markets panic and people panic in the short term, right? Always. So I would say if the bubble bursts, like I would buy, like the bubble burst when DeepSeek happened, Nvidia, and then Nvidia went up a lot after that. And if you'd bought Nvidia when it went down, which people like Dario of Anthropic was saying, I don't see why this should impact Nvidia's stock price. He was right. If you had listened to him then, okay, you could have made probably 60% increase in your stock portfolio. So there is, I think, people tend to panic, but like here's the other side, right? I would ask anybody in the audience and our hosts, panelists, would you like to go back to a world where you can't use ChatGPT or Claude or something? How would you feel? For me, I'm like, I use it like all the time, right? It speeds up everything. So for me to go back to a world without it, I mean, just this podcast, the show notes are produced by AI. Like, of course, they're human revised. I can take the transcript and put it into another AI and produce even better show notes, right? That's a lot of work. The transcriptions of this thing, the subtitles are generated automatically with AI. That's a lot of work, right? There's a bunch of places I'm now able to read things in any language because I'll just translate it and it's quite readable. It's way better than Google Translate. Also, if I ever want to catch up on a book, I don't have to go find some badly written Cliff Notes. I can ask AI to give me a summary and it's better than Cliff Notes. It's more customized to what I'm asking, right? So it's already very, very good at knowledge work of certain kinds. Not at knowledge work that demands precision, like engineering. It's very good at it, but then it's not. But at knowledge work that is actually more like human and like more soft skills kind of knowledge work, it's very good at it. It's very good at tone. It's very good at those things. It's not exactly the best at details and facts, and that's where the hallucinations are more troublesome. But I would contend that we're already seeing very clear delivered value. And the other piece I want to end my point with is I was listening to a guy from Anthropic who's talking about this. He said, bet on the exponential because most of the compute that we've been buying hasn't even been deployed. It's starting to be deployed now and then into 2027. So all those investments that you've seen of 100 billion, 200 billion, they have not yet been realized in terms of like you have to build the buildings and put in all the GPUs. The GPUs have to be made. So all of that is going to come online. Then you're going to have two things. You're going to have bigger models with like more training. You're also going to have many more kinds of models and tests and use cases being built. So there's going to be an increase, a step change in the rate of progress. And they're working on the next breakthrough will have to involve maybe continual learning, which is that, and I'm making prediction, predictions are hard about the future. But it's about continual learning is an AI that can, in the context of what it's doing, actually be like, oh, I could like fix this, I could adjust this. And there was a paper by Google a few days ago on like one idea they had about it. But if that breakthrough does happen, we're going to see a huge jump in the exponential. So that's kind of, I'm very much that AI is still highly underestimated. And the fact that people think it's a bubble is a huge opportunity for people who are very strategic and can find areas where AI is exceptional. But for a lot of like just throw stuff at the wall approach with AI, I don't think it's working too well.
Yeah. I would add a little bit more from the conference. So we're getting there where the technology is either there or almost there. And now the question is about the business cases, actually. And that's what one of the speakers was talking about, that we are now, it's kind of obvious when you speak about it, but many people were not very conscious about it, that we're now at the stage where we understand that AI is just a tool and that the business is about solving a certain type of customer and solving a certain type of problem. And you can use AI as a tool to solve that problem, but it doesn't mean that the AI is the solution. It's just that AI is a tool that provides the solution. And that's why you cannot build your business solely on AI and make it all hype about the fact that your business uses AI, as if you do not have your mark, and if you do not have your customer, if you do not tackle a certain important business problem, unless you are a technology company like OpenAI, where you just provide the solution, the technology itself. But again, those companies are very, very, very limited amount, and we are speaking not about them, but about startups who are using them as a tool.
Mm. Just a little note on your self-driving car example. When I was at a branch of the Technical University of Munich in 1997, give or take a year, they had a self-driving car that was driving through the city of Munich almost autonomously.
30
That
years
is
ago.
97. Could have been 96 as well. I don't remember exactly. And it was the only condition that they had was they had to have somebody at the steering wheel so that the drivers around that car wouldn't crash when they see a self-driving car and would be totally surprised about it in the last century. And about that throw at the wall approach, in the startup where it was in 2000, 2001, the chief venture capital guy who was most involved in all of that said, we have a rate of 1 to 50. We are funding so many startups, and if 1 in 50 manages to come out positively, then we're happy. So it's not 1 in 20 like you said initially, Igor. It's not like 1 in 100 as you said later, but that was the expectation 20 years ago. So
yeah. And by the way, a good question about the technologies which had already been developed before. Another good example of that is VR. When we had this VR thing, which happened about seven 8 years ago, and everyone started to speak about VR, it was like, oh yeah, like we invented VR. No, we didn't. VR existed at least from the beginning of 90s. There were VR computer games at the beginning of 90s. Literally.
Yes.
And then the technology it wasn't exactly forgotten, but it was kind of forgotten, not really in popular use. And then it was reinvented at 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, basically there was, when I joined the W3C in 97, there was a guy running around who's trying to get Tim to accept a proposal for VRML, a virtual reality markup language. I mean, nowadays, barely anybody even remembers that was a thing back then. And it wasn't the huge hype, but it was there, and it was ready to be deployed. There were very, very cool demos. You could play it on a two-dimensional screen, like the usual flat screen. Back then we still had cathode ray tubes, but you could play it on a regular screen. But you could also use VR glasses already back then, and it was all a bit clunky, but it was all there. And even the neural networks and the reinforcement learning and everything that we have here is that is all stuff that I worked on when I was in the university in the early 90s. We've had that.
I think the idea is, so I think this is actually going to lead us to a very good point. Also, VR is just a 3D screen, which is 360 degrees with haptic feedback. It's kind of like, that's all there is. Like it's a 360 degree screen with it's 3D, and you can do 3D on a you can go watch a movie in 3D. All you need is like glasses with it's not a hard technology. It's just the 360 aspects. It's a wearable headset, and then there's a bit of haptic feedback. But it's really bare bones. It's a fairly straightforward technology. Now, when we talk about this, so VR was invented in the 90s, maybe earlier. AI was in neural networks. We also have like iPads and iPhones were like the smartphone and the tablet were invented again way back in there was these in the early 2000s. There were attempts at these devices. Steve Jobs himself, like when they were pushing out the Macs and stuff, they're like, we want to have it like be something you can carry like a laptop. But it's like the laptops that were being produced sucked. So it's not that the ideas are not complicated. Neural networks are not complicated conceptually. It's the scaling, and this is why people who bet on AI believe you should bet on the exponential, Because what's happened with VR is we have way more compute power, so things look better, graphics are better. We have more storage now, things load faster, so you can have much more hyper realism than you could before, right? And the headsets have gotten lighter. The haptic feedback has got, it's just improved a lot, right? It's the incremental improvements that have really added up. That's what's happened to computers over time. They got smaller, they got lighter, batteries got better. Soon we could have laptops, and they got thinner. Then we could have like the iPod, and then we have the phones and like the tablets. Like, so it's these trends, and this is also something when people say in AI is like there's the exponential and these emergent capabilities and increasing use cases that just happen with each step change in improvement. So I think that's very crucial to see.
Yeah, there is from 96 or 97, there was a guy giving a talk about the advent of voice over IP, of voice telephony, of IP telephony. And he explains it like that. Back then, the bandwidth that was available for over an average dial-up line was growing rapidly. I mean, I entered the game when there was 300 bits per second, and I went to 2,400, then 14.4, and then eventually was 56K. And at the same time, the availability of sound compression, audio compression, the required bandwidth went down. Originally, it was, I don't know, something like 256K per second or something like that. And as compression technology became better, and the commodity CPUs became better, the bandwidth need for a voice communication went down. So eventually, you have increasing bandwidth for everybody, decreasing bandwidth need for voice for IP telephony, and at the cross section was in about 96 when that guy was giving that talk. Suddenly things became possible and commoditized kind of automatically. There wasn't anybody who chose that voice over IP would be a thing. It just so happened because the capability of two independent technologies reached such a cross section, such a tipping point, when suddenly stuff became manageable, doable, commoditized, available to everybody, that wasn't available to everybody before then. Like the internet. The internet was there since the 60s, but it was only an elite small group of people who could afford it. And that is more or less what is happening with AI now. The progress is becoming popularized, available to everybody now. And let's see what people make out of it.
Yeah, and it's the same with like video on the internet, right? So at some point, internet was very slow, right? You couldn't really stream video on it, or it was really not good. Now you can stream 4K, it's better than your television at what like the bandwidth it can provide. So it's like you can now do movies, broadcast, all sorts of things. And again, it's the exponential nature of these tech. It's not that they're categorically new. It's not that they're conceptually sophisticated. It's that they're scalable and they are being scaled. That's really been why technology has been. The difference between technology and us is that every generation of technology is on an exponential curve. We're not on an exponential curve.
Yeah, I mean, there is that point where quantity, like for example, bandwidth, turns into quality. Now before I had, I don't know, a 50K line, and then a 100K line, and then 200 and 500 and 800. Oh, now I can do TV. Now I can do YouTube. Now I can do a podcast like this. Now I can record a podcast with 3 synchronous video streams coming together just for the purpose of recording.
Yeah, before this would cost like millions of dollars, or would have been impossible, And you go back 50 years, like not 50, like you go back to 1950 or something, it wasn't even conceivable.
Yeah, I mean, you had black and white television, and that was a luxury, and cathode ray tubes, and the average person could barely afford a radio.
Even cars have grown so much, and now the technology is going back into cars with screens and processors. Cars will continue to. So I think it's the fact that technology is modular and interoperable, and it's also exponential. And a change in one technology can have, so the smartphone happened and then they change everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like one technology can also change everything else around it if it changes human behavior. So we're going to see that whenever self-driving cars, if they happen to happen in a true sense, you will then have a sea change in how humans behave and live. Because suddenly, if you get these robo taxis, right, the commute and travel will totally change,
Yeah.
right? If you have kind of similarly to this, if you have the next generation of like AI models become almost free, right? You will have language tutors and translators and stuff all the time. Like there's already these Apple earphones and like these wireless the AirPods Pro and I think Google Pixel Buds that will do real-time live translation between languages. You can go to a country and somebody's talking to you in Spanish and you're going to hear it in English. And when you talk, if they've got the earbuds, you talk in English, they're hearing it in Spanish. That's already a current technology. And it may not work perfectly yet, but it's already happening. And what happens in 2 years when translation becomes better and it becomes much cheaper to do and the compute requires less? Like all of us will have, like the Babelfish will have been, it is already an emerging technology now, right?
Another example of that, I remember I watched some kind of video with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and they were speaking about flying cars. And he said a thing that we actually have flying cars. Those are helicopters. They're technically flying cars. They perform the function, but they are not really feasible for the city. But now, if you look at what people do with flying cars now, there is another technology which is kind of close to helicopter, but much simpler, which came into being, which is drones. And now when you look at what they do stuff in Dubai, they have flying cars which are basically drones, and it's much more feasible than a helicopter. It doesn't destroy things around. It's not that big. It doesn't need any anti-grav, which we first of all we cannot do, and second, it probably require a lot of energy. And so all those problems, they simply not relevant now, because now you can just make a car which is kind of a drone and it works and it's fine.
And it all doesn't always have to take the shape the sci-fi authors have given to things. Like for example, I mean, unfortunately, most people I talk to about AI, first of all, confront me with the Terminator. And I tell them there is not going to be a Terminator. And the picture I'm painting for them is there is not going to be a humanoid robot running around on 2 feet holding a machine gun in their hands. Unfortunately, there already is a Terminator. I'm afraid, Igor, you know more about it than I do. And these Terminators don't have legs and arms. They just have quadcopters. And they are flying around in Ukraine and in Russia and in the Ukraine bordering regions of Russia. And they are killing people. And so far, as far as I know, they are not completely autonomous yet. But it's, well,
I mean, if one human can,
small step.
if they're 90% or 95% autonomous to the point where one human can now run 10 drones, you know, that you have 10x the lethal capacity, you know, per drone, or per human, really. And then kind of, you know, it's like if these things did want to kill us, like it's pretty easy. Like I think we're violating every rule in the book, right?
Yeah.
Like have AIs that will never kill a person, like you know, like every rule in the book, you know, never harm a human, like all the stuff that Asimov wrote, like we're any rules that any guards, you know, like don't make them do photorealistic video, right? Like don't make them like imitate, like any guardrails that anybody has ever said are absolutely violated. So we just hope that these things are friendly to us. I don't see why they would want to be, personally. I see no
don't see
reason
why
at
they
all.
wouldn't.
Yeah, I could see why they wouldn't. I mean, look, let's not take the malicious case of, you know, we're this like bad species that's killing things or whatever. Let's take a very simple case. We take a lot of energy on the planet. We take a lot of space, right? And we're very slow compared to these computers. We're extremely slow, right? We take, you know, we need sleep. We need all sorts of things. So, like, you know, compared to us, these machines can be way faster, right? And like I heard a metaphor that we'd be like trees to them, you know. So it's like, what happens when we need to plant some like fields and grow some crop? We just cut the trees. What happens when we want some lumber? We just cut the trees. Now, we're not as useful as trees. We don't have built-in carbon capture. And we also don't really do anything that useful. Like, we don't produce fruit or anything. Like, there's nothing that, and especially that they wouldn't want. So I think like it's going to be a very interesting thing. But like, yeah, the Terminator is like theatrical flair, right? That's like how an author imagines what would captivate an audience, or like a human-like thing that's not a human that's going to kill us all. Okay, fine. But in reality, we will have humanoid robots also, because those can get around the best because the world is designed for humans, right? And if they wanted to, like, we're so easy, like we've taught these things how to manipulate us, how to anything, like they can control all elections, like like it's just so that's like one thing that I think we have not at all recognized, I think. But if they're friendly, then yes, we can have a very wonderful world. But no matter what happens, there's no reason an AI will ever look like a Terminator, but it could certainly do the function, no problem.
And they do.
Yeah, and there's one
But
thing in Terminator which they
just
yeah.
one thing, because you mentioned Asimov. I've been thinking about Asimov a lot last week. I have the vague suspicion that another work of Asimov's is going to be very popular 10 or 15 years down the road, if it's going to take that long. Foundation. Igor?
Yeah. Yeah, I personally think that a way for the humanity is in the space, and it can conceptually, like philosophically, solve lots of problems, because now you have lots of space and now you can get away. You cannot get away from a globe, but you can get away into space, and that's basically general. But I want to return to the previous topic regarding the Terminator. I saw a video of some kind of machine, like basically ML model, which helped the machine gun to aim. And what we saw in Terminator, which was wrong, is that when they were shooting, they were missing. They won't be missing.
No,
That thing
they
was
won't.
literally shooting so well, so fast, that it's like they will never be missing when they're completely automated. Never. They will react way faster than you can, and like, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, so LLMs are kind of these dumb general models. I mean, they're very smart, but they're kind of dumb and slow. If you look at like specialized models like AlphaZero and stuff, they're not nearly as complex, and they're way better at chess, for example. So
And
if you have a specialized shooting model, it would, like, what you're getting from your LLMs, you're like, oh, this thing is kind of, that's not the like, if you had a specialized model to shoot, it would shoot.
yes.
Yeah. That was a specialized shooting model.
And we could
Exactly.
and that is stuff that we probably could have done already in the 90s, except that we didn't have the environment around it, the connection between what is happening in the IT department in the data center on the one hand and what is happening in the front line in the other. LLMs are not going to, I don't believe that LLMs are going to take over the world, because they don't have an intention. LLMs just are still on the level of, let's create the next most likely token, or maybe the next most likely token sequence, if it is really a smart thing. But I mean, if you don't feed it, it won't generate. Okay, great. Where my attention always goes with such conversations is vision language action models, because they perceive they have a continuous inflow of data, impulses, inspiration, however you want to call it, and they always have, and they immediately have an opportunity to react. And now, if these are combined with fluid learning, and then they can, for example, learn to shoot and learn to aim on themselves, because they realize, okay, I shot roughly in that direction and I missed. So what do I have to do? If my goal is to hit, for example, that bottle there up, just the neck of the bottle, not the body of the bottle, and I missed in this and that way, then I'll aim, for example, a little bit higher the next time, so that I hit the neck of the bottle and not the body. And that's going to give us a very, very, very interesting world. We may
and
be
people
able to
have
enjoy
this.
it only for a short time.
So it sounds more like Warhammer than Foundation, you know?
No, by the way, when I spoke about Foundation, what I meant is the idea of there is going to be a period of chaos. How can we prepare for that so that the period of chaos is as short as possible?
Mm.
Is it outer space? I don't care.
No, I think that's all beautiful, but I think it's way too romantic, both of these. Like, if it wanted to kill us all, we'd be dead in one night. Like, gone. Like, humanity wiped forever from the face of the planet. Like, gone. Okay, one night. Right.
We have a
Not yet.
quite interesting arch of discussion. Like, we started with Elevate Fast in Toronto in 2025,
Yeah.
and AI bubble and problems with VC funds, so on and so forth, and then we end up speaking about the future and in the grim darkness of the war.
Well, I've written kind of. I think the correct direction for us is we have to advance ourselves, our own capabilities. I think we have to become transhuman. Personally, I think there's going to be a merging into the AI kind of thing over time for us. If we don't do that, and AI could be carbon based, right? It's silicon based right now, like our processors are. AI is not. AI is just math, right? It runs on silicon. It could easily run on carbon, right? AI is just like OS.
There are startups. I read articles about startups who are training models on brain cells.
Yeah. So, and brain cells are very, very interesting. So, we have our brain size is constrained by the fact that we're born out of a birth canal, which can only be so wide, right? Because if it's too wide, a female cannot run, and if she cannot run, she can't run away from a lion or run after it. So it's been constrained by that, right? Our brains could be way bigger, and we could be way smarter, right? Now,
we should have that discussion with an elephant.
It's not necessary that they're probably smart in other ways that we don't really measure for, right? Humans are the only like tool using, language using kind of apes. So, but even amongst humans, if you do brain size, there is some correlation with intelligence. It's weak, but it's there. So it's not like there is bigger brains are that they're bigger for a reason. With bigger muscles, you're stronger. With bigger brains, you can think better. It kind of makes sense, right? So essentially, like you kind of like, I think, yeah, we could be way smarter as humans, and we could also have much bigger technology than what we have. And so I suspect that there will be a revolution of superintelligence, no matter if we're around or not, to witness it on this planet. And that will be a transformation in terms of like life will really take its own design into its own hands, and it will like evolve a lot faster, like millions of times faster. And that's where I think we'll see a rapid transformation of planet Earth from a like a historical biological like evolution got us here to a rapid transformation into superintelligence and rapid colonization of the solar system and then beyond.
Actually, there is some kind of a theory in biophysics. A theory, well, a train of thought. Let's call it a train of thought. There is the emergence of life on the planet. Can be described by a set of equations by an Austrian guy called Manfred Eigen in a set of papers that are called the hypercycle. And the hypercycle basically tells you if you have, if you have mutually catalytic processes, like for example, a certain amino acid catalyzes a certain piece of ribonucleic acid. And this piece of ribonucleic acid is good at catalyzing the creation of that the complementary amino acid. Now you scale that up, you get a circular structure with 40 or 50 elements, and then suddenly things change and you get a first virus. You have a certain error rate in the copy process that constrains how much information you can put into that virus. When that is exceeded, suddenly you get the first bacterium. However, non-core cellular organisms, however they are called in English. when they have a better copy rate, a lower error rate, so they can capture more information. When that happens, when you reach the limits of that, suddenly you get cells with a cell core, and you switch from ribonucleic acid to DNA. So you get again a better error rate. You can process more information. You can store more information. You get a bigger, more complex system. We seem to have reached the simple chemical error rates at about that time, and multicellular organisms started to emerge, which could again gather and process more information from simple algae over jellyfish over, well, you know, the tree of life. And then eventually, when that was exhausted one way or another, we came on the surface, and we started to use tools. And over time, we started to, for example, carve letters into clay tablets and things like that, and learned writing and invented papyrus, and started with a typewriter, and Gutenberg with a printing machine, and the ENIAC, and the first computers, and the next generation, and the internet, and everything was building on that. So you can actually draw a continuous line from what we today call artificial intelligence over the underlying technology in cloud computing, which builds on the internet, which builds on standard IT, which builds on writing electricity and a ton of other technologies that has been available 100 years ago, which builds on, and eventually when you look back at it, you still find there is that hypercycle, an ecosystem of complementary elements that work only in their combination. So one way to think about it, my preferred way to think about it actually, is there is going to emerge one way or another a synergy between artificial intelligence and natural intelligence, where we complement each other and we respect each other more or less like people respect trees. Yes, okay, we have to cut down that tree over there. Sorry, bye-bye. Next one, please. Maybe like that, maybe with a bit more respect and more conservation. But it is inconceivable to me that, let's say, a culture of AI is going to completely detach from everything that has happened since the first autocatalytic cycle has come together. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I
Yeah, by the
think
way,
that makes sense. But the question is this autocatalytic cycle, let's call it that, where it's iterating millions of times faster than evolution has done at a historical rate. Can any biologics compete? Or so, if you're not competitive to some degree, you're dead. You know, like
We still have algae, we still have bacteria, we still have jellyfish, we still have sharks,
yeah,
we
but we
still
don't
have
have any dinosaurs, and we
crocodiles.
don't have any. So any predators of humans are dead. We kill them, right? Lots of animals we've hunted to extinction. Like we've tried to eradicate mosquitoes and ants, like these sort. Like we just
Good
haven't
luck.
been able to.
Yeah,
I
see?
can add. I will add another representation of what you're talking about. We actually can see of this like informational being as a representation that we are living nearby, and it's if to think about conceptually, that's a legal system that we are living under, because the legal system as itself actually kind of coexists with us, and sometimes we're sacrificing people for the sake of the legal system, and it decides which people to, let's say, sacrifice, how to deal with them, how to not.
Eat.
Yeah, we are developing this legal system, but we are just like from this legal system, we're just a foundation on which it is based. So it's kind of like a very simplistic representation. That's essentially what it is. And if
Yep.
you're speaking about AI, it's just something way more complex. Yeah, and it's like an digital intelligent being. I mean, it's kind of in that domain. It goes in that domain. We can already see the results of that in our life for a while,
Yeah,
actually.
you could as well call the economic ecosystems and put them on a similar level. My old colleague Stephen Pemberton is giving excellent talks on that, and he's explaining Kurzweil's theory of the singularity in conjunction with AI in a brilliant way. He's really an excellent speaker. So I just believe that the general principle that whatever comes next will stand on the shoulders of giants in its own way. If it is qualitatively as different from us as the Terminator is, it will probably find its own way to stand on our shoulders, and it may not be particularly comfortable to have it on our shoulders. But I don't believe that there is any other way how this can happen. I mean, he can't.
What I hear you saying,
Doesn't
if I was
disappear.
to translate it, is look, that we have an ecological niche that we're unaware of that AI won't be able to dominate just the way that we do. That's, to me, that's
Yeah.
what you're, because
Yes, that's a way
now
to say it.
that's a possible. Look, here's my contention. My contention is very simple. All the evolution on the planet Earth so far has been biological. Okay, it has not been informational. It has been chemical, right? The
No.
rate of the informational has emerged from the chemical and has slowly realized that, oh, like brains can actually be useful, right? Brains are not just an energy. Like we shouldn't just have small, like big bodies and small brains. We can actually have bigger brains. Like they can actually be useful. But humans are really kind of the only species that have really figured that out to the level that we have. There's like proto tool use and proto language that some other species have to a very limited degree, but they have not made the step change into, oh, brains can be enormously useful, right? Even though we don't have the biggest brains in the animal kingdom, we have by far the best use of our brains.
Yep.
So now, but that's like, and you saw what brains did to the rest of the planet, like our brains. Okay, it's decimated all other forms of life. Like they're really struggling, right? The ones I mean, and there's a mass extinction going on. Are some species surviving? Sure, but we're talking about how many? Like
No.
how many? Like what is the starting number, right? Now, if we talk about the next stage of evolution, which would be informational and happen at way bigger scales globally, much more rapidly, right? And can pull information. It has structural characteristics which are far superior to ours, right? Like we're still constrained by DNA. It doesn't have a DNA constraint on
No, we're
replication.
not.
We are, because when a human is born, their height is determined by their genetic potential. Like you can feed, like you cannot get them to outgrow their genetic height potential. So
Yeah,
AI
but that's
doesn't. Yeah.
as you say yourself, that is not the decisive limitation. The, you said information is stored in chemistry. No, that is not true. Information used to be stored in chemistry in the early stages of the hypercycle, but if you look at how our brain works, the information isn't stored in chemistry. The information is stored in the structure of the neural connections of the brain. That is
This is
what
correct,
determines what we can do. And
but the
beyond
rate of
that,
firing is determined very chemically. The, the,
yeah. So
the rate of the impulse travel is electrical. It's a little faster, right? But the rate of the neuron firing, how rapidly a neuron is able to fire, is very determined by chemicals, right?
yes, that is true. But
Um, the
as we
bit
all
rate that
know,
our brains can have is quite constrained.
yeah. So what? The because it's the unit of a bit stands in context. A bit is relative to a probability distribution. Now, if we rewire our brain in a more intelligent way, then we can survive with a lower bit rate. And one way how we are doing it is we're actually writing things down. One of the most important inventions of the late Middle Ages has been glasses,
Yeah.
because the
So
best
these are
people you had
great.
back then.
But think about, so think about us as information processing systems. If we all agree that information processing is the next stage of evolution, that'll be in the realm of like information processing and how you can process information, like if that's going to be the next stage, right? Rather than this kind of how big our bodies are and that kind of, because you can just manufacture with metal, you can make better, stronger body parts than you ever could with bone, right? So if we agree that that physical stuff can be made better than it can be biologically produced, right? Which I think we have plenty of evidence of. And then we're talking about the mental stuff that differentiates us, the information process. Think of us as an information processing system, okay? I already talked about our bit rate is constrained, right? We can't add or lower capacity. We need sleep, all this stuff. We need food, all this stuff. Besides that, the input output is also slow. Like the eyes have limits, the ears have limits, okay? And to read something there is, so a book can be written sequentially, right? But once it's written, it is a simultaneous product. It exists from back to front at the same time. But we cannot read it like that. We have to consume it sequentially. So it takes a long time, right, to get through it. If you take a diffusion model, not a sequential model, the diffusion model, it can perceive things all at once, right? And like our eyes, when they're perceiving the world, do take it in as a gestalt, right? But we can't think that way. We can't read that.
Are you sure?
To some degree, but not our anyway. That's sort of a little bit off. But the point is, we have a lot of constraints as an information processing system. We're not optimal at all for that. We're very good at, with low resources and low food, and like we can go for long periods of that. Like, we're really good at surviving on planet Earth the way the planet Earth has been. Okay, we're very poorly adapted to a world where the primary sort of landscape of evolution is how good you are at information processing.
What I've been trying to say is, life has been about information processing all along. Even if it's just copying 50 bits of a trivial RNA in a virus, life has been about information processing all along. And life as a concept has become increasingly good at it. And let's say 20 or 30,000 years that humans are on planet Earth are just a flash of light in the darkness of night. So whether we have really kicked out all of life on the planet, or whether the rest of life is just inhaling to blow us away, we have no idea. We're going to see in 50 or 100,000 years where we stand in evolution. And maybe it's, just to put it out there, we just don't know how our coexistence with silicon-based information processing is going to be like. We have a decade of experience with it, or maybe two.
And in that decade or two, we're falling behind very far.
Yeah.
From a capability standpoint.
We will see. It's about as interesting as the machine gun that has enabled anybody and his brother to stop every knight in shiny armor, independent of everything that evolution has done to us over millennia before. And it's very much the same with penicillin. It's the opposite side of the scale. Machine guns take life, penicillin saves life. But again, from an evolutionary point of view, penicillin and other modern medical achievements are giving people an opportunity to live who wouldn't have had an opportunity to live 500 years ago. And maybe they will make just the decisive invention tomorrow, who knows? Or maybe they did it already yesterday and it just hasn't disseminated yet, in order to arm us for whatever is coming in the 21st century.
Let's hope that exists. I hope it does.
Yeah. Gentlemen, I think we're nearing the completion time for our discussion
on the AI bubble.
Yeah, for the AI bubble. Yeah, for the AI bubble and Tech Fest in Toronto. Exactly.
I'm glad we've talked about that.
Yeah. Again, the discussion led us in absolutely different direction.
It was such a nice, well-grounded topic originally.
So practical, and we really tried to kind of say let's talk about something investors and entrepreneurs and business executives would be interested in, and I think it is interesting to those audiences, but not for practical purposes.
Yeah.
I think everybody's underestimating how unbelievably huge the space of possible futures is.
I agree with this 100%. I just want to say that anywhere I look, we're like ants, unless we can significantly change. And I don't mean ants like, oh, ants can survive. No, not like those ants. We're like dodos. We can't fly. Like we're like these flightless birds that are big and easy, like easy prey. Like we're like, so like to me, it's the how are we not dodos piece, not like, oh yeah, like there's a lot of good scenarios, but dodos would have a tough time no matter which scenario you talk about.
Yeah.
Or we're like chickens, we can like fly like a little bit, and and the other birds can like stay in the air like forever and keep going up. It's like,
chickens are a surprisingly old species, and they are almost everywhere on the planet.
Because they're very nutritious for humans.
Not just that. I mean, when I was in the jungle in India 20 something years ago, we were doing an elephant ride through the jungle, and suddenly something was moving in the leaves, and it was a chicken. Like it looked like exactly the chicken on the farm of my uncle.
Let's
I mean,
hope AI has as much of a proclivity for entertainment as we do.
that would be fun. Put an entertainer, a poison pill into every AI, and the shape of the poison pill is, let's have fun.
Yeah, it's it's more like
let's make a joke.
Let them leave because they're kind of cute and entertaining.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. I think that concludes us for today. Very, I don't know what to call it or anything title-wise, but this is fascinating. I really enjoyed it, and we'll be back next week for more.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.